Year 8 and welcome to today's lesson, a continuation of travel writing. Today we're going to read a piece written in 1842 by the English writer Charles Dickens. Now, most of us know who Charles Dickens is. He's a very famous English writer. He wrote works such as Oliver Twist, Christmas Carol, and David Copperfield, which we are going to be reading an extract of in another comprehension piece, inshallah. So today, Charles is describing his first experience on a heavy sea on one of his travels with his wife to America. They went there by ship. So it says in 1842, Charles Dickens and his wife traveled to America. In this passage, he describes his first experience of a heavy sea. Samson was a man famous for his great strength. Samson is going to be mentioned in the passage. That's why they just mentioned him previously. Now, all right, let's get to it. American Notes for General Circulation. That's the title of our work today. It is the third morning. I'm awakened out of my sleep by a dismal shriek from my wife, who demands to know if there's any danger. I'm woken up by a terrible, shocking scream by my wife, who wants to know what's going on. I rouse myself and look out of bed. The water jug is plunging and leaping like a lively dolphin. All the smaller articles are afloat except my shoes, which are stranded on a carpet bag, high and dry like a couple of coal barges. So he gets up and he looks out of bed. He looks at the water jug and is jumping up and down and plunging into the water just like a lively dolphin, like a dolphin's movement. So we have a simile here, don't we? All the other objects, the smaller articles, are afloat except for his shoes, which are stranded on a carpet bag. A carpet bag is a kind of bag that was used in these times. Is basically like a bag made out of carpet fabric. It's very strong, so you can use it to travel. So it says it's afloat on the carpet. It's stranded on the carpet bag, high and dry, like a couple of coal barges. A coal barge is like a boat that's used to, it's a very flat boat. You've probably seen it before. A very flat boat is used to, in rivers, like to take coal from one place to another. Okay? Suddenly, I see them spring into the air and behold the looking glass, the mirror, which is nailed to the wall, sticking fast upon the ceiling. At the same time, the door entirely disappears and a new one is opened in the floor. Then I begin to comprehend that the stateroom is standing on its head. So the ship is standing on its head, basically. That's what happened. He said, now the ship is standing on its head now, right? Before it is possible to make any arrangement at all compatible with this novel state of things, before he could do anything to try to figure out what to do with the new state, the novel state, the new state of things, the ship rights. The ship rights, he means it goes back to its normal state, the normal state of what a ship should be. The ship writes. Before one can say, thank heaven, she wrongs again, maybe in its head, maybe in another position. Now, if you notice, he's calling the ship a he, so he's using personification here as well. Thank heaven. Before one can say thank heaven, she wrongs again. Before one can cry, she is wrong. She seems to have started forward and to be a creature actually running off its own accord with broken knees and failing legs through every variety of hole and pitfall and stumbling constantly. Now the ship seems to be a creature working, moving on its own accord, its own intentions by itself, with broken necks and broken knees and failing legs. So you can imagine how stumbling the ship is. Before one can so much as wonder, she takes a high leap into the air, a high jump. Before she has done that, she takes a deep dive into the water. Before she has gained the surface, she throws a somersault. It's like a movement in gymnastics. You put your hands and you turn your whole body over. The instant she is on her legs, she rushes backward. And she goes on staggering, heaving, wrestling, leaping, diving, jumping, pitching, throbbing, rolling, and rocking. Wow. Very, very descriptive of how hectic things were and how chaotic everything was. And going through all these movements, sometimes by turns and sometimes all together, and one feels disposed to roar for mercy, to cry for mercy. Okay, to roar for mercy, disposed, inclined to ask for mercy. A steward passes. A steward is the attendant. You have a steward and a stewardess. A steward passes. Steward, sir. What is the matter? What do you call this? What does the steward say? Rather, a heavy sea answer and a headwind. A headwind, okay, that this is what Charles is saying. A headwind, imagine a human face upon the vessel's prow. The prow is the front side of the ship. And sometimes it's pointy, sometimes it's bent, like that front side that rather, I wouldn't call it protruding, but it's like the first thing that you see on a ship. So a headwind, imagine a human face upon the vessel's prow with 15,000 Samsons in one bent upon driving her back. Now that's why he mentions Samson. The author of the book mentions Samson. So we can imagine Samson is riding the ship, driving the ship, okay? With 15,000 Samsons in one bent upon driving her back and hitting her exactly between the eyes whenever she attempts to advance an inch. The ship wants to move on, but Samson is almost restraining her. Actually, 15,000 Samsons restraining her. Imagine the ship herself with every pulse and artery of her huge body swollen and bursting under this small treatment, this terrible treatment, sworn to go on or to die. Now, you have 15,000 Samsons restraining you, but you're insisting and you're fighting with all your might and all your body. Hence all the throbbing and the heaving and the staggering and the jumping and all of these movements. Sworn to go on or die. Imagine the wind howling, the sea roaring. It's almost like he's painting an image for you to see, right? Imagine the wind howling, the sea roaring, the rain beating, all in furious array against her. Everybody's against her. Picture the sky both dark and wild, and the clouds in fearful sympathy with the waves, making another ocean in the air. Add to all this the clattering on deck, the sounds of the objects and the pans and things hitting each other, clattering on deck and down below, the tread of hurried feet and the loud hoarse shouts of seamen, the gurgling in and out of water through the scuppers. The scupper is like it's a part of a ship, like a hole that lets water out of the deck of the ship. Okay? With every now and then the striking of a heavy sea upon the planks above, with a deep, dead, heavy sound of thunder within a vault, heard within a vault, and there is the headwind of that January morning. I say nothing. I'm not even going to talk about. Okay, that's what he's saying. I'm not even going to talk about what may be called the domestic noises of the ship, such as the breaking of the glass and the crockery, which are basically the plates and the dishes and the cups. The tumbling down of the stewards, the gambols overhead of loose cracks and trot dozens of bottled porter is a kind of beer, and the very remarkable and far from exhilarating sounds raised in their various staterooms by the 70 passengers who were too ill to get up to breakfast, the sound of moaning of the people that were very sick, or maybe they were vomiting, so they're not very exhilarating sounds, like he said. I say nothing of them, for although I lay listening to this concert for 3 or 4 days, I don't think I heard it for more than a quarter of a minute, at the expiration of which term I lay down again, excessively seasick. So he says, I've been listening to these sounds for 3 or 4 days, but I don't think I've ever listened to any of them for more than a quarter of a minute, because he himself lays excessively seasick. But he said, not seasick be it understood in the ordinary acceptation of the term. I wish it had been. But in a form which I had never seen or heard described, though I have no doubt it is very common. I lay there all day long, quite coolly and contentedly, with no sense of weariness, with no desire to get up or get better, or to take the air, with no curiosity or care or regret of any sort or degree, saving that I think I can remember in this universal indifference, having a kind of lazy joy. So he was very relaxed. He didn't care about anything around him. A lazy joy, a fiendish delight. Fiendish is wicked, evil. A fiendish delight, if anything so lethargic can be dignified with the title. Now, to feel lethargic is to feel like you don't want to do anything. So if you read the sentence without the part inside the hyphen, it makes it's easier to understand. So he says, and this universal indifferent, having a kind of lazy joy in the fact of my wife being too ill to talk to me. That's the only thing basically he can remember is being happy about. Or being surprised about. So he said, having a kind of lazy joy in the fact of my wife being too ill to talk to me, nothing would have surprised me. If, in the momentary illumination of any ray of intelligence that may have come upon me in the way of thoughts of home, a goblin postman, a goblin is like a fantasy, a creature from fantasy stories. It's ugly, like a dwarf, like a monster. A goblin postman with a scarlet coat and a bell had come into that little kennel before me, broad awake in broad day, and apologizing for being damp through walking in the sea, had handed me a letter directed to me. If a goblin came to me, he was wet because he was coming through the sea and gave me a letter in familiar characters, I am certain I should not have felt one atom of astonishment. Wow, so he's almost being hyperbolic in describing how indifferent he was to anything. So he says, I should not have felt one atom of astonishment. I should have been perfectly satisfied. If Neptune, which is like in Greek mythology, he's basically the god of water, of fresh water. If Neptune himself had walked in with a toasted shark on his trident, which is basically his like steel stick, the one with the 3 prongs, you always see it like the one that the devil is holding, it looks very evil. But here in this case, it's with Neptune. So if Neptune himself had walked in with a toasted shark on his trident, I should have looked upon the event as one of the very commonest everyday occurrences. Wow, Charles Dickens, he's not great for no reason now, is he? It's almost like he described everything and everything was vivid, the movement of the ship and how he felt and how indifferent he felt and the ship and the sounds and everything. So yeah, but I would advise you to read it carefully twice, like once or twice. And then it'll make a lot more sense. And every time you read it, you're going to understand it more and you're going to realize how great of a piece it actually is. Now let's move on to writing. It says the most effective travel writing not only successfully creates a vivid sense of place in the reader's mind, but also allows the reader to share in the thoughts and feelings of the writer. It has been said that the best travel writing you discover it has been said that in the best travel writing you discover as much about the writer as you do about the places he or she has visited. So much of the enjoyment of reading accounts of travel comes from learning about faraway and exotic places that you may never be able to visit in person. However, a good writer can also make you look differently at places that you know well by writing about them from an unexpected or an original point of view. As with any form of writing, choose close attention to detail and careful choice of descriptive vocabulary are important techniques in bringing the scenes to life. All right, excellent. As for the activities, we have 2 writing accounts that we're supposed to write. An account of a place, number 1, number 2. The first one is about a place that you know well, and look very carefully at the prompts. Read the prompts very carefully and make sure you write or you answer to each one of them. And of course, if you have something more to add, then the more the merrier, right? And in number 2, it says, write an account of a journey that you have made that took more than 1 day. But the challenge with this task is that you have to make the journey interesting. Now, question number 1 was written in the form of prompts, right? If you look at question number 2, it says, write an account of a journey that you have made that took more than 1 day. You can describe the journey by any means of transport. The challenge with this task is to make the journey interesting. To do this, you need to focus not only on just what happened. Now, from this part on, it would make life so much easier if you divide these sentences by yourself into prompts. So what are you going to do? Number 1, focus not just on what happened, but how the other people involved added to the experience. Number 2, what your thoughts and feelings were while you were traveling. Number 3, You can also include details on starting and finishing the journey, for example, by writing your experience in the departure and the arrival. Okay, so whenever you divide your writing into prompts, it'll make it so easier for you to plan, to organize your piece of writing, to organize your ideas, to be able to add things each and every time. All right. So this is the homework for today's work. There are no questions in Charles' passage. And that is it for this lesson. Thank you very much, Year 8.